It all started on an ordinary Thursday evening, the kind of day you barely remember later. But that night became one I could never forget. My name is Emily Parker, and I've been married to Daniel for 7 years. Our life was quiet, comfortable, maybe too predictable at times. Daniel worked long hours as a real estate agent, and lately, I'd been feeling that silent distance creeping in between us, the kind that no argument causes, but silence feeds. That Thursday, Daniel had invited a few friends over after work to watch the game. I'd made dinner, pasta, salad, and garlic bread, the usual spread. Among his friends was Ethan Blake. I'd met Ethan only a few times before. He was Daniel's closest friend from college, charming, funny, and effortlessly kind. He had one of those smiles that made people feel instantly comfortable. As the guys chatted in the living room, I tried not to eavesdrop. But every now and then, Ethan would glance toward the kitchen and offer to help. And I couldn't help noticing the small things. Like how he thanked me each time I handed him something, or how he actually listened when I spoke. It was rare, lately, to feel seen like that. By the time the game ended, rain had begun to fall, steady and heavy. Daniel had had a few drinks, more than usual, and was in no condition to drive. I suggested he stay home, of course, but then Ethan offered, "I can give Emily a ride home if she needs." "I'm heading the same way," I hesitated. Daniel just laughed. "Yeah, Em, go with Ethan. He's the most careful driver I know." I remember standing by the door, holding my umbrella, wondering why my heart suddenly beat faster. It wasn't about Ethan. It was just, the situation felt strangely uncertain. I didn't know then how that short drive would change everything. The car ride started quietly. The rain drummed on the roof, the wipers slicing through the night. Ethan drove slowly, both hands on the wheel. After a few minutes, he spoke. "You seem tired, Emily. Everything okay?" His voice was calm, the kind that invites honesty. "I guess I've just been feeling a little forgotten," I admitted, surprising myself. "Daniel's busy all the time. We barely talk anymore." Ethan nodded. "He's lucky to have you. You know that, right?" I smiled faintly. I don't think he remembers that. There was silence again, comfortable this time. But under it, something unspoken hummed. When he stopped at a red light, Ethan looked at me for a second too long. Not in a way that crossed a line, but as if he wanted to say something and couldn't. Then the light turned green. He said softly, "You deserve to feel seen, Emily." Something about the way he said it, quiet, certain, stayed with me long after we reached my street. When we pulled up to my house, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. I reached for the door handle, but Ethan's voice stopped me. "Emily, if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm around." "No pressure." I turned back. He smiled gently, that same warm, steady smile. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." He waited until I got inside before driving away. I watched his taillights fade down the street, still feeling that strange mix of gratitude and confusion. I didn't know how much that single offer, "I'm around if you need to talk," would echo in my life in the days to come. Because soon, I would take him up on it, and that decision would change the way I saw both Ethan and my marriage forever. The next few days passed quietly, but my thoughts didn't. Ethan's words lingered. "You deserve to feel seen." It was the kind of sentence that keeps replaying in your head long after it's spoken, because part of you knows it's true. Daniel had become distant, wrapped in work calls, open houses, late meetings that stretched past midnight. We used to share coffee every morning. Now, I'd often wake to a cold mug on the counter and a note that said, "See you tonight." Except, tonight rarely came anymore. It was Friday afternoon when I saw Ethan again. I was leaving the grocery store, trying to carry 3 paper bags and an umbrella at once, when a familiar voice called out, "Need a hand?" I turned, and there he was, smiling under the same navy raincoat he'd worn the other night. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" He shrugged, taking 2 of my bags without waiting for an answer. "Just grabbing a few things." Lucky timing, I guess. We walked to my car together, laughing as the wind tried to snatch one of the bags from him. It felt easy, too easy, talking to him. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. After loading the groceries, I thanked him. But before he walked away, he asked, "Coffee? There's a cafe just around the corner." My treat, I hesitated. It was harmless, right? Just coffee. Just a friend. So I said yes. The cafe was quiet, warm, the air rich with the scent of roasted beans and cinnamon. We sat by the window as rain pattered softly outside. We talked about simple things, work, books, childhood stories. Then, slowly, the conversation turned deeper. He asked about my marriage. I wasn't sure what to say at first, but something about the way Ethan listened, really listened, made me open up more than I meant to. "I love Daniel," I said quietly. "But sometimes it feels like I'm living beside him, not with him." Ethan didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix anything. He just nodded. "That sounds lonely," he said finally. "It is." That one honest word hung in the air between us like a confession neither of us expected. When we finished our coffee, he walked me to my car again. Before I left, he said, "You know, Emily, you don't have to carry everything alone." The kindness in his voice caught me off guard. I smiled, trying to hide the ache in my chest. "Thank you. You're a good friend." He looked at me for a moment, then nodded. "Always." As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Not between us, maybe, but inside me. Because for the first time in months, someone had actually seen me. And it scared me how much I needed that. That evening, Daniel came home late again. He was distracted, scrolling through his phone as he half listened to me talk about my day. I tried to tell him about running into Ethan, about the coffee, but he only said, "That's nice," without looking up. It was such a small thing, but it hurt more than I wanted to admit. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I replayed Ethan's gentle tone, his attentive eyes, his quiet understanding. And then I felt guilty for even thinking about it. But the next day, Daniel canceled our dinner plans again. And that guilt slowly gave way to something else, sadness, and the pull to talk to the only person who seemed to understand. So I texted Ethan, "Are you free tomorrow?" He replied almost instantly, "For you? Always." The next day would bring the first moment that made my heart question everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and what it truly means to be seen. Saturday afternoon came with a gray sky and soft rain, the kind that makes everything feel quieter than usual. I told myself it was just another conversation, just two friends catching up, but deep down I knew it wasn't that simple anymore. Ethan met me at a small art gallery downtown. It was his idea. "Somewhere peaceful," he said. When I walked in, I spotted him near a painting of an empty field under storm clouds. "Hey," he greeted softly, smiling when he saw me. "You came." I needed a little escape, I admitted. "This week's been heavy." He nodded as if he understood without needing details. That was the thing about Ethan, like he always seemed to understand. We walked slowly through the gallery, pausing at each painting. Every now and then, our hands brushed when we leaned closer to read the descriptions. Each time, I felt a strange flicker of awareness, a warmth I couldn't name. When we reached a painting of a lone figure standing by a window, I said quietly, "That one feels familiar." Ethan looked at it for a moment. "Because it's how you feel." I nodded, my throat tightening. "Like I'm waiting for something that's not coming." He turned to me, his expression gentle but serious. "Emily, you deserve to be with someone who shows up, really shows up." The words hit deeper than I expected. For a second, I couldn't speak. Then I whispered, "You shouldn't say things like that." He held my gaze. "Maybe, but it's the truth." Afterward, we walked outside. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried that cool, post-storm stillness. We found a bench under a maple tree, its leaves beginning to turn amber. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Ethan said quietly, "You're not the kind of person who gives up easily." "I can see that." "I don't want to give up," I replied. "But I also don't want to feel invisible anymore." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Daniel's my friend. I shouldn't even say half of what I'm thinking right now." "What are you thinking?" I asked before I could stop myself. He hesitated, then said, "That if you were mine, I'd never let you feel unseen." For a moment, the world seemed to still around us. The sounds of the street, the wind, even the rustle of leaves, all faded. I didn't know what to say. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from something dangerously close to longing. I stood abruptly, trying to steady myself. "Ethan, we shouldn't—" "I know," he interrupted softly, standing too. "You don't have to say it, I just needed you to know." The honesty in his voice broke something inside me. I nodded, unable to meet his eyes. We walked back to the parking lot in silence. When we reached my car, he opened the door for me, then stepped back. "Take care of yourself, Emily," he said quietly. "Please," I managed a faint smile. "You too." And then I drove away, the image of his face lingering in my mind long after he disappeared in the rearview mirror. That night, Daniel came home early, the first time in weeks. He brought flowers. My favorite, white lilies. "I thought we could have dinner together," he said, smiling tiredly. It should have felt good. It should have felt like hope. But as we sat across from each other, talking about his day, his clients, his deals, I realized I didn't feel what I used to. Something inside me had shifted, quietly, painfully, but completely. I still loved my husband. But I had started to see the cracks I'd ignored for too long. And worse, I couldn't stop thinking about the one person who saw them too, and didn't look away. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Ethan. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line. I just couldn't pretend I don't care." My fingers hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to delete the message. Another part wanted to reply. I took a deep breath and typed 3 words. "Can we talk?" I didn't know it then, but what would happen after that message would leave me completely stunned and change everything I thought I knew about both men. When I sent that message, "Can we talk?" I told myself it was for closure, that I just needed to clear the air, set boundaries, and end the confusion before it went any further. But a part of me already knew the truth. I wasn't looking for closure. I was looking for understanding, for connection, for the piece of warmth that had been missing in my life for too long. Ethan replied almost instantly, "Of course. Name the place." I hesitated, then chose the small park by the lake. Quiet, open, safe. It was Sunday afternoon. The sky was clear, the air crisp with the first hints of autumn. When I arrived, Ethan was already there, sitting on a bench, looking out over the water. He stood when he saw me. "Thanks for coming." "Thank you for meeting me," I said softly. "I just needed to talk." We sat down, leaving a careful space between us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Ethan said, "I shouldn't have said what I did. I crossed a line, Emily. Daniel's my friend. You're his wife. I know that." "I know you didn't mean harm," I said. "It's just, everything's been so complicated lately. I feel like I'm losing myself trying to hold everything together." He looked at me then, really looked. "You're not losing yourself. You're fighting for yourself." There's a difference. Those words. They hit harder than I expected. I took a slow breath, my voice trembling. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple," he said, "but it's real." We talked for over an hour, about Daniel, about my loneliness, about the way things had slowly changed over the years without either of us noticing. Ethan didn't try to take Daniel's place. He didn't even suggest it. He just listened, the kind of listening that makes silence feel like safety, not judgment. At one point, I said, "I don't even know who I am outside of this marriage anymore." He looked at me with that same quiet certainty. Then maybe it's time you start finding out. Those words scared me. Not because they were wrong, but because they were true. When we finally stood to leave, the sun had begun to dip behind the trees, painting the lake gold. I turned to him. Ethan, thank you for everything. But maybe we shouldn't talk for a while. I need to figure things out. On my own, he nodded, his expression calm but sad. If that's what you need, I'll respect it. Then, after a pause, he added softly, just know that I care. That's all. He gave me a small, understanding smile and walked away. No promises, no lingering looks, just quiet respect. And somehow that simple act made me admire him even more. That evening, I sat in the living room while Daniel worked at the dining table. For the first time in months, I really looked at him. He looked tired, not just from work, but from everything we weren't saying. Daniel, I said quietly, can we talk? He looked up, surprised. Of course. What's wrong? I feel like we've been living next to each other, not with each other, I said, voice shaking. And I miss us. I miss the way we used to be. Daniel blinked, setting down his pen. Emily, I didn't realize how far I'd drifted. I thought I was doing everything right, providing, working hard. I know, I whispered. But I don't need things, Daniel. I just need you. Something in his expression softened. For the first time in a long while, he reached across the table and took my hand. I want to fix this, he said quietly. If you'll let me. That night, I lay awake long after Daniel fell asleep. Part of me felt hope, fragile but real. Another part of me couldn't stop thinking about Ethan's words by the lake. Maybe it's time you start finding out who you are. And in that quiet moment, I realized something important. Before I could fix my marriage, I had to fix myself. I had to rediscover who Emily was. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's comfort, but as her own person. I didn't know what that journey would look like, but I knew it had to start now. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, soft, warm, gentle. It felt like a new beginning. I got out of bed quietly so I wouldn't wake Daniel. For once, my heart didn't feel heavy. It felt determined. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at the woman staring back. She looked tired, yes, but she also looked stronger than she had in months. For the first time in a long while, I saw myself, not just Daniel's wife, not someone waiting to be noticed, but me, and I decided that day would mark the start of something new. When Daniel woke, I sat him down at the table, the same table where our silence used to grow. I've been thinking, I said gently. We've both been running in different directions, trying to hold things together without really seeing each other. I want to change that. But I also need some space to find myself again. He looked confused. Space, like time apart? I nodded. Not forever. Just for a little while. I want to focus on me. The things I love. The things I've lost touch with. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling to process it. Did I do something wrong? No, I said softly. You were doing your best. We both were. But I can't keep giving from an empty place. I need to fill my own life again before I can share it with someone else. He stared at me for a long moment. Then finally he nodded. If that's what you need, I'll respect it. That small act, his willingness to understand, meant more to me than I could say. Over the next few weeks, I started doing things I'd forgotten I loved. Morning walks by the lake, painting, visiting the library, meeting friends for coffee. Little by little, I felt life returning to me. Daniel and I still talked every day, kindly, honestly. Sometimes we'd share dinner, sometimes just a message wishing each other good night. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And then, one afternoon, I saw a message on my phone from Ethan. Hey, haven't heard from you in a while. I just wanted to check in. Hope you're okay, I smiled. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I should reply. Then I typed, I'm okay. Taking time to breathe. Thank you for reminding me I could. A few seconds later, his response came, You never needed me to remind you. Emily. You just needed someone to listen while you remembered. I sat there, reading his words again and again, feeling gratitude rather than confusion this time. He was right. Ethan had never tried to take anything from me. He'd simply helped me see what I'd forgotten, that I was still enough all on my own. Months passed. Daniel began making changes too, cutting back on late work, taking weekends off, showing up in ways I hadn't seen in years. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, he said quietly, "You were right. We forgot how to love each other without rushing through life." I looked at him. Really looked. Maybe we just needed to remember who we were first. He nodded. And now? I smiled softly. Now we start over. Not as who we were, but as who we've become. He reached for my hand, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the distance between us. It wasn't a perfect ending. It was an honest one. A few days later, I saw Ethan again by chance at the same cafe where we'd once sat months earlier. He smiled when he saw me, the same warm smile that had once stirred confusion, now only gratitude. "Hey," he said. "You look happy." "I am," I replied. "And thank you, Ethan, for helping me find my way back." He shook his head gently. "You found it yourself, Emily. I just held up a light." We talked for a few minutes before saying goodbye. And as I walked away, I realized something important. Not every person who enters your life is meant to stay forever. Some are there to remind you who you are, so you can go back and live fully again. That night, as Daniel and I sat together watching the quiet rhythm of the rain outside our window, I felt peace, the kind that comes not from perfection, but from truth. From growth. From rediscovering love and yourself all over again. The end.